Got a pretty good relevant breadth of experience for the group that we're talking to today.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Brett, to the organization. Yeah.
So I'm Brooke Stegmeyer, and I work with Healthcare Intelligence, and many of your names are familiar to me. And my role in HI in our new structure is client services, and so we'll talk more about that as we get going as to what that means. And so I'm happy to join you. Thank you for having me today. And I also wanted to, Hannah Thomas from our group is also on, and so we'll let her introduce herself as well.
Hello. So I'm Hannah, and I joined HI in September of last year. I was most recently at Swedish at the First Hill campus for about 4 years, and my responsibility is most easily understood as the Chief of Staff for HI. So I am accountable for our book of business, and my background is oncology research.
Great. Thank you, Hannah, and thank you, Brooke. And I realize I have not introduced myself. Most of you know me, but for those of you, we continue to add new folks to this group. So if I've not met you, my name is Karin Larson-Pollock, and I'm the Chief Quality and Analytics Officer at Providence in Everett. So I'm sort of the informal coordinator of this awesome group of people. So, okay, I am going to share my screen. And hold on, give me 1 second. It'll take a minute to get up here. And we're going to go through, I thought to maybe best frame the conversation, we sent out a SurveyMonkey to everybody at the beginning of this week. So thank you very much. I was going to leave it open-ended, but with this large of a group, I thought that might be helpful to have a little more structure to the conversation, or at least know where maybe we very much want to spend time on the key areas. So can folks see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Okay. So I'm going to walk through these, and then we'll walk through each one of the questions, and then we'll kind of go from there. But we set it really around collective pain points. So really wanted from both sides to really talk about where is there frustration, or where could there be opportunity for more collaboration or more seamlessness of how we all work towards really doing great things with analytics. So our first question for everyone was what's your greatest pain point regarding access to system data and resources, or system data? And specifically, as people have sort of emailed in some areas that they would like to talk about, there seem to be some areas, sort of 4 buckets of questions, and so that's how I bucketed these together. So there seemed to be a lot around lack of clarity, and within that lack of clarity around these particular 7 different areas. So
You don't mean literally the lack of clarity, actually?
Oh,
sorry.
Oh, I forget who I'm talking to here. Yes, exactly. But I'm bum-ching. So really lack of clarity around kind of what these look like. The top answer that folks, it rose to the top for lack of clarity was really around who has access, right, to what, and what are the standards for access, and access being kind of broadly defined, so we'll talk about that, but really who has it, how do you get it, what are the standards, and what does that look like? You can see right after that was how to get access. So not only who has it, what do you need to do to get it, but if you want access, then how do you get that? And those two combined were by far and away the top vote getters for sort of the greatest pain points from this group here. Right below that was tools, software, and access available day one or even month 1 for new hires. I know that's been a big frustration for a lot of folks. And so we'll talk after we go through the survey around what's sort of HI's responsibility, maybe what is over in IT, and where are the routes for some of these, because as I looked at some of these, they actually might not necessarily be healthcare intelligence, but we ask globally around kind of these system pain points around analytics. So if there's another group that is responsible for it, let's identify that, and I'll promise on that side to take it to the right people if it's their domain. Right below that was non-coordinated help between areas, and I know that was like a Swedish prov that had come up a few times. Of it seems like help desks aren't coordinated, and one ticket will go somewhere and then it seems to fall off before it goes elsewhere, etc. So lack of coordination. competency training for access, so sort of kind of goes along with the top three, right? So is there, who has access? What are the standards for access? How do I get it? How do I train for it? Or can I test out of it, right? If I show that I've got certificates, etc., what are the training requirements around getting access to particular things? And then access tracking, right? So ongoing access, I know this has come up a few times of folks saying they had access to something, then, at year one of when they got access, then it rolled off and folks were unaware that they were losing access, etc. So some more transparency around what it takes to have access, and then how do we track who has it, and if it's going to roll off, so communication is more forthcoming and proactive. And then the last one was around purchasing and software and licenses. So is there a standard process for how we do payments, how we license, who we go through, etc. So lots around access and the standards around that. So that was the by far and away top for that question. For question 2, again, the greatest pain point regarding access to system and data resources, lots around lack of what I bucketed it as almost communication and education. And so the areas that had come to the top, it seems like folks had similar frustrations with all of these. One is methodology. So what are the data sources and report methodology coming out of the system reports? What resources are currently available, so not even knowing what's out there and what we can use and what we have access to. There's frustration around how to use the data and the resources and tools that are available. So one is, how do I know what is available? How do I know how to use it? And are there ways that are standardized or systematic on how we can train to be able to utilize those better in a really proactive way? So initial training and then ongoing training and then for new hires. Some specific answers or parts that came up were communication and education regarding which stored procedures drive which reports, and then new and discontinued software applications, databases, and platforms. And I've heard from folks, I didn't even know something was going away, or how do we know what is going to be rolled out or sunsetted from system? There seems to be some a need for much better and targeted communication around what's being used, what's coming out, what's sunsetting, and what's coming down the pike. For the next one was what we bucketed as sort of confusion, right, around lack of standard list of SQL Server databases and the servers that they reside in and the level of rights. Confusion around why some requested tables are not extracted to the EDW. So these two are pretty similar in terms of their response rates. And then the dev uploading schedule. So confusion around when that is it frequent enough, etc. The last quantified question that we had, or quantifiable, was greatest pain point regarding lack of access. So again, access has come up so much, we actually designed a question solely around that so we could really frame the conversation. The top choice was the reporting code and or methodology. So again, that share or not sharing code, the policy around that, or if code's not going to be shared, at least understanding what the methodology is, it seems to be a pretty big challenge. And folks with the lack of access, then the next best step is to find the code or the methodology, and there's frustration around all three areas. SQL servers to use SSMS or SSIS, etc. Lack of access to download Tableau reports for learning purposes. Installation of common free software, Chrome extensions, etc. And then the ability to schedule interview reports are the areas that specifically came up around that. And then we asked a question, this is the first free text, and then there will be another one. Said, feel free to describe any other pain points regarding access to system data and resources. Info view reports, so restricted column and data epic reports that produce incorrect data have been reported to fix in vain and no chance of knowing the algorithm behind it. Expanded ad hoc access to tools specifically designed for visual data analysis like Tableau or Lumira that will enable visual exploratory data analysis. Another pain point is lack of confidence in the data because pulling data from Amalga often returns a different result than the data that's pulled from the clinical analytics, the system clinical analytics using the same query logic. So using same logic, different results. So then obviously the data gets questioned. This one's a bit of a long one. Biggest pain point, not being able to easily access tools necessary to do an excellent job. Getting data extracts out of tools that were not intended for products, for producing data extracts like Tableau and Webby to do the work, while the underlying data is readily available on a SQL server. Recurring mistakes in Tableau reports. Inadequate information to drill down to provide an operational plan to the C-suite or the board on how to affect change. So, having Tableau reports get corrected or change the format field names without any downstream notification to users. As a consumer, then again going back to the being unaware that those changes have been made, and then ultimately sort of breaking reports on this end. Those are the big buckets on that one. And I'll send the summary of this out to everybody post this call. Just know that that will go out to everyone. HI perception about hunkering down and embarking on big projects, right? But if local folks aren't allowed to have access or really to use them locally, is that the point, right? Or how do we work? How do we better allow the front end folks who are at the regions to best utilize the tools that are done through HI? So there are the next one is around many different system reports. So different reports and systems at this point, it's unclear as to what's out there. No communication when new things are developed, how to request new information or reports, etc. I think we saw that captured in the questions above. Someone said so many options to choose. Yes. The next one, library catalogs of metrics, reports, and other resources curated and centralized, and a formal vetting process for adding to the above. And that sort of went to the next one, which was we could use a central library or wiki to record information about databases, resources, reports, etc. And then collaboration is the last two. So really, how do we collaborate, HI, non-HI, to work collaboratively? So between HI, non-HI, between Swedish and Prov roles, and how do we all sort of work synergistically and not doing dual work? And then the last one is again around reports that are changing so quickly and what's coming down. How do we know about it? How's it working correctly? A couple more questions, and then we'll get to the discussion. We asked what areas would you like to have access? So this access has become such a big topic of conversation. 84%, almost 85% said the data lake. SAP HANA was right behind that. The code for HI written reports and the EDW tied at about 60%. Data science efforts, function views that have been created and used in other databases and schemas, and scheduling the execution of stored procedures on dev. So those were the top ones. And then a quarter of people said the MD staff database tools. So by far and away, Data Lake and SAP HANA and were the top two getters with code for HI written reports right below that. And the EDW was right there too. And so we asked two other qualitative questions right at the end, open-ended. What are the questions do you wish HI would ask you? And the questions that came out, it was not a question, but more cooperation from HI in order for us to support our ministries and region in a more effective way. And I know Brooke will speak to that. She actually came to talk to my analyst group up here as well, because I know we all want to work well together, but we're all feeling a little bit of pain points. So how do we have a real honest conversation and really figure out where we get rid of the pain points? And then question, what are your needs? So question from HI of folks saying they'd love to have HI ask them what their needs are. Love to know how to build a proper intake, scorecard, and ranking system for metric input and approval. Someone wrote down they'd love an HI to ask, what concerns do you have regarding Callisto and how can we address those? And then the last one was what analytical effort has been done at the ministry level and what is planning to be done? What types of data scientists and analysts each ministry has so we can work with the strength that different analysts have and collaborate with HI. So then that could help HI as well as the system. And I believe HI is actually, and maybe Brooke, you could talk about that. I know Karen Burns has talked about that as well, of sort of amassing a list of who's doing what so we can leverage the sort of the brilliance of everyone. And then our last question was, what other questions would you like to ask HI? The first one was, will Callisto provide an integrated portal to access software programs owned by different entities, like Insights, Finance, and Webby for HI? What would it look like if all data consumers got what they needed? Which I love that question. how to provide metrics not currently in broader use, used by one mission, and then how to adapt them to system-wide. How to change control priority, or how are change control priorities set? Can we establish a time-based SLA for review of our submissions? And then the last question was timeline for big changes that would heavily affect everyone. For example, when is the EDW going to go away? What's the plan of migrating? Where are we at with the data lake, Callisto, or any other big changes we need to be aware of and prepare for? So that was the results of the survey. Lots there. Thank you to everybody who really responded pretty quickly when we sent out. It was a bit last minute, and I really appreciate folks inputting on this when we really wanted to make sure folks' voices were heard. But those are sort of the areas that were sort of rising to the top as we talk about collaboration and access between the regions and some of the system resources. Anything not captured that folks feel should be on the docket, or how do folks feel about how the survey results sort of came out?
Seems like we're going to have a couple more meetings.
Yeah. And I think everyone on this call, I mean, you can clearly see that folks are really invested with trying to make this work and work well, right? We've got, almost 60 people on a call on a Thursday afternoon. So yeah, I think it's, for me, it was really interesting. I loved people's openness and honesty, and I know all of us really want to we want this to work, and we feel like from everybody's side we can do better, right? We know we can do better with this. But, okay, so with that then, Brett and Brooke, I'm going to turn it over to you now that you sort of know where sort of this group, their pain points are, and I know you've heard a lot as you've gone through the regions. I'm going to turn it over to you guys to open it up as wherever you want to start.
Well, there's a lot of territory to cover there. So let's think. So Brett, how should we get started? What I would say in terms of initially is we are doing some pretty key making changes in both in our structure and in our work process, and in some of the integration efforts that we're doing to address some of the themes that came out in what you shared today. We also are, we can certainly share information around the roadmap of some of the major projects that you've called out as not having enough information about. We can also, if you want to see it, we can start on some of our structure changes and go through a couple of the major projects that you've called out, if that would be helpful to provide some background and framing of the discussion, and then see where that goes and builds from there. Would that be helpful at all, or where do you want us to start?
Yeah, I think that sounds great, Brooke. Let's start there.
Okay. So shall I share my screen, Karen?
Yeah, let me give you control. Where are you at here? There you are. Okay. Look, I'm going to give you control.
So I have to start with a little bit of reflection. This is Max, and those of you from Alaska, I'm sure know who Max is. I always think having a little bit of a doggy presence with difficult conversations can help make things a little bit easier. And Max actually is one of our caregivers in Alaska, and he visits or has visited pediatric patients who have cancer. And so as we kind of go through these discussions, maybe this helps us remember what our collective mission is, which is to take care of our patients, and then also remind ourselves that at the end of the day, we have people that are dying in our organization that really need our care. And in retrospect, some of what we're going to talk about today, we need to have that perspective that it's not as tragic as some other areas. And everything we're going to talk today about is solvable if we listen to each other and work together. So that's my reflection, and then we'll go into this. One of the things that we have found out as we've toured the different regions or rounded with the different regions And we've been talking with a lot of your leaders in different areas, and we've seen some of you in a couple of our areas. And it's always expensive when I go to Alaska because I always have to stop by Tina Zacker's office, and then I buy her photography. So anyway, I've seen some of you in our rounding, and one of the things that people are interested in knowing about is our current org structure, because you've heard about a lot of changes in our group. And so as many of you know, maybe some of the California people don't, and I look forward to meeting you in a couple weeks, Michael, is that we report up to the Chief Data Officer, who reports up to Janice Newell, the CIO. So we're part of IS officially. And HI has been in IS and out of IS over the course of our background. And then Brett McLaren, as you can see here, he's our Group Vice President for Client Analytics Services, and I report up to Brett. We have Mark Primo, who manages his team, builds and manages the Enterprise Data Warehouse, and they manage all the servers that you do or do not have access to. I saw a bunch of access issues or questions raised, and his team administers all that access to the Enterprise Data Warehouse, to many of our tools, and to our servers. And then Kim Jackson is new to our team, and she comes in from the St. Joseph group, and she's our Vice President of Strategy, Products, and Governance. And so she is going to be leading a lot of the master data management area. And one of the things that I've heard as a common theme in your discussion today is, and talking to Karen's group this week, is the lack of master data management, where when you look to the products, if you look in My Highway or if you look at our reports, you don't know what the definitions are. They're lacking in metadata. And Kim's group is very strong on that, and they will be integrating their methodology across our teams. And so I'm hopeful over time that you will get a lot more of the knowledge you're seeking as you look through any of our products and tools. And so you'll have a lot of that metadata available to you through My Highway and other avenues. The other thing about Kim's group is that she has a very strong training program that we will be rolling out, and we've already started that process. But analysts on Kim's team are required to quarterly do presentations that are relatively short, 30-minute presentations, but they publish a schedule out to the organization. So there'll be a published schedule that you can decide when and where you want to join at routine times, and then we will share the work that we've been doing. We will share anything we've learned from it, and some of them could even be co-presentations with some of you. But we intend to have a very disciplined rollout of a training schedule to really make sure we are making sure people are aware of the products and you're getting training on them. And then speaking of Callisto, Callisto is very much of a work in progress. We have about 100 people in HI working on Callisto, so you're correct in that HI tends to hunker down on massive projects, and that's one that we're doing right now. As part of that, it is, some of you remember, because you're part of the discussion, that we have the initial rollout of that on June 30th, and we are finalizing the training schedule for that, hopefully this week. And then you'll see postings in HealthStream for how you can sign up for that training that will run through, I think it's going to go June, July, and August. And then Hannah Thomas is on the call, and she's our Director for Strategic Program Management Services. And I kind of look at her as the glue that holds all this together. So she is the one that will help keep the message consistent across our teams. I see a lot of people in this attendees list that used to be part of HI. And some of what we've experienced over time and what you're picking up on, even in some of your questions that really aren't related to HI, is just kind of a fragmentation that occurs as you work with large systems. And so we have experienced that in HI, and we are committed to really aligning priorities and execution across all our pillars. And so we will have, as part of that, some pretty routine communications coming out of HI as to what we're doing, who's doing what, who's moved. So I think we'll be able to address a lot of the concerns you raised about communication. So before I go to the next slide, let me just stop and say, Brett or Hannah, anything to add here?
Well,
No, you've done a good job. That's
yeah.
ordinarily what I do.
I think you did a really nice job of summarizing some of the key accountabilities that are relevant for this group. I think the other, just the one thing to add is, this is a thoughtful and conscious restructuring and integration of the analytics, the centralized analytics resources across Providence and St. Joe's organization. And we are really doing this in a thoughtful manner to better achieve the scalability necessary to ensure that we're supporting the entire organization with the information that you need to drive decisions. So this is very much a thoughtful way to approach and address many of the concerns that you all have individually raised and collectively raised.
And I would just say a sort of a housekeeping item is that this particular org chart that Brooke is sharing, two things. One, it's future state, and two, there's a couple of, in terms of the names on here, some of these, it's not necessarily accurate. So please take this and just understand, look at it from a roles perspective and not a names perspective.
Yeah. I see we have, I see that, Hannah. And to your point, yes, I do sound like you because I've been listening. So, I got the sound. So sure, she went hoarse. We went out to Spokane and met with leaders for a period of about 6 hours, and she was barely talking by the end of the day. So Sherman, I wanted to mention him real quick before we go on to another slide, but Sherman is our executive director for product management and advanced analytics. And so he is responsible for build and rollout of My Highway. And also, we've given him a lot of feedback that's come in from some of you and then across the regions that there's not enough metadata in My Highway. And then as people pull up content in My Highway, they're not sure which report they should use because so much content comes up. So the first problem we solved by getting all the content in there, now we have to curate it in a more intelligent way. And he also is responsible for the rollout of the No-Show app. We have some people in Oregon that have been piloting that, and it is now rolling out into Cadlick, and that one's going out. Also, the data science work occurs in Brett's pillar underneath this, I believe underneath the analytics services spot, which is a TBD. So we have some people in healthcare intelligence that joke that it would be really funny if we hire somebody and then their initials are TBD, because we have so many TBDs right now. So I'm going to skip over to my structure, which is one of the reasons why Karin invited me here, is that this is my area, and so I want to particularly talk about the data consultant role. We understand that we have lost the connection, or our connection with the local ministries has frayed, because we have been so focused on the system level and delivering those big projects that we've lost that connection that makes some of what we do relevant at the local regions. So we are purposefully going about addressing that with this consultant role, and there will be, and again, to Hannah's point, don't get too hung up about the way it is represented here. There will be some changes to the client base here, but you will have a single point of contact. So if you don't know who to go to for what, and you're, as some of those questions that you were answering, you're confused as to who to talk to about what, these will be single points of contacts for you to work with. And we hope that they will be able to embed with you and really get to learn where your pain points are, understand what problems you're trying to solve, bring that intelligence back into HI, and then help you also navigate our tools and systems. So really trying to simplify the process and then make our roles more relevant to you. The other thing that we're doing with this shared services consultant, I want to explain that a little bit. One of the things that we have is just a real pillarization, even at the system level, where people across pillars in Renton don't know what each other's doing. And we have, in the past, HI has been modeled where we've had a lead per CPS group, say, or a lead for several different areas in population health, and then a different lead for rev cycle, a different lead for finance. And what we've found is a lot of those projects are all using the same data. So we're trying to bring all of that together in a purposeful way to balance, not only balance the shared service so everybody gets their fair share of the share, but also to make our solutions more integrated and purposeful and meaningful. So let me stop there and see if Brett and Hannah have any comments on that.
So, Brooke, I would just make this comment not directly related to looking at the resource allocation and ensuring that we're effectively utilizing that to serve everyone. You know, it's basic stewardship. But I would just say, given that this is being recorded and clearly we can take screenshots and all like that, I would just say, please, I am working on an external partner presentation that we will be sharing at a later date, and so I just want to make sure that people have the most current information. And so this is probably about 2 months old, so you really don't, this is I didn't realize that Brooke was going to share this and walk through this particular presentation. Otherwise, I would have given her the most current one. But the point is that just sort of use this as a Etch-a-Sketch, as a framework. So really don't commit any of this to memory, because I will share the most current one at a later date.
And so you see, we have pillars within HI that clearly don't communicate well with each other, and this we have just demonstrated that for you right here in real time.
And Brooke and I are dear friends,
yes,
so
yes.
And she and I talk a lot, but that kind of thing happens. So, anyways, but.
Yeah, and so to Hannah's point, we're going to get a version of this slide deck out to you, and so you'll have the latest copy and be able to study it, ask questions, however. Okay, cool. Let's see. Another slide over here. I wanted to share this. One of the questions we get a lot is, and this one too is dated, we have a new version of this that we are working through this week. To add more, the version that we will share more broadly, to Hannah's point, will have a lot more detail here. So a lot of questions, and some of the questions coming up here was around when I can have access to the data lake, when I can have access to HANA, when I can have access to all these tools. So it's all a question of timing. And what is happening right now is we are purposely integrating the data from St. Joseph Health and all of Providence. And that is going into a combination of the data lake and HANA. So as you can see, everything in purple, that data is being integrated with St. Joseph Health in the data lake. Everything in orange is currently going into HANA. And then at the maturation process, I would say probably this goes through 2018, the end of 2018. A large part of that data will be in one or both of those tools. So as this project or this process winds down, I would say roughly, say first quarter of next year, then you will have the idea is to have all of the data in the data lake, but delivered through HANA. That a lot of people with NHI don't even have access to the data lake. There is a full range of many different languages you have to use to program in the data lake. And those languages, which one you use, can depend on what you're trying to do and what the data is that you're trying to work with. It is not a SQL tool. And so we've had to bring in experts to help us, and our teams have gone into some pretty intense training, self-training through YouTube videos and such to really come up to speed on that. So the data lake is not going to be available to many people at all outside of HI. However, it will be the data in it will be delivered through HANA, or HANA will be the data processing engine, and then the tools that you'll be most familiar with are Tableau and Webby, which you already know, and those will function very similar to what you have now, and Lumira, which is a self-exploration tool that is very easy to use and very fast, and I think you'll be very happy with it. You will get exposure to that as you go through the training building up to Callisto. The major project for all of you where you'll get exposure to these new functionalities is Callisto, And again, that training is going to start rolling out in June. Let me stop there and ask the questions, or Hannah and Brett, then invite them to speak up. There's Brett talking.
Yeah, I'm just responding. So which goes to what I just wrote. So if you think all data should ultimately land in the lake, but that is raw, basically raw, unformulated data that comes from the sources, or various sources. Then we go through a process of data curation and mastering where appropriate. And that that curated data will be accessible through, we'll be publishing that through the back end of HANA for its performance, but you would actually be accessing it through your front end tools. So you'd be using the tools, and I believe, based on some of the questions I saw, folks aren't familiar with Lumira yet, and you're excited to get it, and you should be. It's super cool. And so that's an area where, as we roll this out, as we get more information in there, and we can start doing training and get people access, you will find Lumira to be a very exciting, flexible tool for you to do data exploration.
We have people on our team who are just have done SQL for all of their professions and are extremely good at it, who have started working with HANA and absolutely love it. It's a completely new way of looking at data and processing data, and I have some YouTube videos that I'll send out to the group, and we will share those with you, and you can start learning what it is and what it does. But it's very powerful. It will address a lot of your pain points around access and speed of delivery and data exploration. And because it doesn't have performance issues in the way that we've had, in the way that you've seen in the past with some of our other tools, it allows you to integrate a lot more data together than you can in any other tool. And so because of that, you can start to really simplify your data footprint, and that allows it starts to take care of that inconsistency between results, or why this report doesn't work, or that one doesn't work, or why they don't sync up. It starts to simplify so many of those questions.
And then actually, Brett, I'm going to ask you, there are some folks who are solely on the phone, so would you mind, if you're typing into the chat box, that would be great if you could summarize.
Absolutely, no problem. So there was a question around that a lot of the information that was on that roadmap looked financial in nature. And certainly we do have some high-profile financial use cases that we're implementing, but Callisto, which you all are familiar with, is actually being built on HANA, and so you will be able to access a lot of the clinically relevant information through that tool set. And then we'll have the ability to build out additional curated data sets for access that will leverage the information and the data model that's being built via Callisto. But HANA, just so you know, you don't query HANA. Like, HANA is a platform. It's a back-end tool. You query via the tools that are basically the systems of delivery, right? That not the back-end platform.
And so to emphasize Brett's point that he just made, this is a more current version of the Data Lake and HANA roadmap, and you can see a lot more acute care, particularly acute care focused content coming into both of these tools. And again, Callisto is the primary project that's bringing all that in at the moment. The other slide that I'll show you that seems to be impactful to people is this one. So first of all, on here, this is some of the major projects Healthcare Intelligence is working on right now. And so again, some of our major projects. So Vantage, some of you are, it's probably not as familiar perhaps in the acute care space, but that is a Tableau-based tool that is highly used on the ambulatory side. Callisto, we've talked about. The Enterprise Data Lake is being branded Synergy, so we're working on that. EMPI is another big area that we are working on that is really, this is the first time Providence will have had something like this, but it's just an enterprise-wide patient identification way that you can identify patients. And so some of the challenges we've all struggled with over time of duplicative patients accounts, that will be addressed through EMPI. Similar to Callisto, on the ambulatory population health side, we have a tool called Community Pathways to Health, but it's also a integrated patient record that spans the continuum and integrates costing data and social determinants of health, and it has predictive algorithms in it around avoidable ED visits. And we're talking to Karin about possibly testing it with her around readmissions. And then here are the apps that we have underway. We have My Highway, No Show, Daily Stats, and iSurvey. iExplore is our branded term for HANA, the HANA combination with, again, HANA, Lumira, Webby, and Tableau, called iExplore. And we're doing that for revenue cycle management. Pharmacy and supply chain are going in now. The Hogue implementation is another area we've been working on. Hogue went live this past weekend. So we have a lot of work going on that. Our single instance of Epic work for HI has kicked off, and I know that's top of mind for many of us and probably many of you. And then CRM is another big project, and then for our Community Connect partners, we are working on org filtering. So high-level summary of some of our major projects. So yes, Michael, the new tools do have the same level of flexibility and customization. In fact, I would say that they've got better flexibility and customization than SQL against the EDW. I would say it has far better. And that's what our developers are telling us, and that's what we're seeing coming out the other end in those exploration tools. So I feel very confident that you'll be very happy with these as they roll out.
Thanks, Brooke. A follow-up question on that. So as you alluded to, we have, kind of legions of people across the organization who have been, trained in, SQL, Clarity, using EDW. And it sounds like you're actively working on training for people to operate well in this kind of new environment that we're moving toward. How do we make sure that we're guiding the rest of the organization outside of HI in that same direction, so that we're developing their skill set so that they're in sync to fully leverage these tools?
So as each product matures and rolls out, we are doing some pretty extensive training. So I've got the HANA, kind of our HANA parallel paths up here. So HANA HB is in production, and it is rapidly becoming the source of truth for HB revenue cycle. And we did several days of extensive training. I think we trained close to 400 people across California and Texas, and we did training also in Oregon and Renton. So this is that's the project where we brought in St. Joseph's Health data and integrated the instances of Epic for HB. And so they are actively using HANA as their source of truth. And so we were able to eliminate a different system that St. Joe's uses. This continues to develop out. Hospital data layer is the next, the biggest of the other ones that we've been working on. And this one, like I mentioned, will come with training in June, July, and August. And so you'll get a fair amount of training associated with this. And again, those trainings are going to be going into HealthStream, I think, within the next couple of weeks. And you all can start signing up for those. And then again, as these get mature, PB is just kicking off. The Community Pathways to Health is also just kicking off. There is some proof of concept in there already. Some of the data is in there that we can demo with, but actually doing it in earnest and adding all the pieces is kicking off. Supply chain and pharmacy, we've been working with Brad Alexander and his team on this one. And that one, we did a proof of concept. Now we're in heavy development mode here. So there'll be training for whoever is interested in this as it gets closer to production. And then we've also, the other thing about HANA that I think you will appreciate is that it has a library of predictive analytic algorithms in it that can be used. And so also, if you have people, like you mentioned in your questionnaire, in your teams that have data science background and want to really get into more of that kind of work within the data that will be in HANA and the data lake, one of the avenues is this library in HANA. And if you, like I said, if you have your own algorithms that you've built over time, you can load them into HANA and use them in HANA. So they have a pretty impressive predictive capability, data science capabilities as well. So the Webby universes, you can think of it as Webby universes. Calypso is a very comprehensive, in the same way that you've always experienced Webby universes. You are correct, the current Webby universes are very narrow in scope because of performance issues. That's different in HANA. It's very different. You don't have to worry about the performance issue. When the data comes in, it doesn't come in pre-aggregated. It comes in at the base transactional level. So you'll have the Webby, the similar look and feel of Webby, but the data underneath it and the performance underneath it is going to be very different than you've experienced in the current Webby universe combination. And I don't know the answer to that, Nick. What tool would one use to access the HANA R server? We just finished the proof of concept on that, and so I don't know how that works.
Yeah, this is Brett. We're I would say we're still actually working through whether the R server will sit within the HANA environment or sit within our enterprise data lake and then connect to HANA. But in terms of loading algorithms at this point, it would be something you would work with HI to do. It wouldn't be something you could simply go in and load one directly. That's not how the tools are designed right now.
So I think Karin, this was probably the extent of the slides that I walked through your team this week. Do you remember anything that I did am I missing anything?
You're not missing anything from the slides, but I think Mike's question in the chat window was a bit of what we all talked about with my team around the policy around Mike, this was a lot of our conversation with Brooke this week. So if you could speak to it, that would be great, Brooke. So HI, do they have a clear policy on who gets access to what? Can we talk about that and address the pain points that folks have in terms of access?
Sure. So we are working on a policy. We hoped to have it done by the time of this meeting, and we do not have that completed yet. So the short answer is no. We don't have a clear policy yet, but that should be coming, and we hope to be able to share that shortly. And then I'll turf that one to Brett from there.
Yeah, I agree with you, Michael, about an operating model that conceptualizes the partnership and roles responsibilities, and that's definitely something we're looking forward to. And to Brooke's point earlier about our strategic data consultants, is that we're really looking to learn how we can best serve the broader organization, including you all as key customers of the tools that and products that we're developing, and to make sure that we are addressing the issues that are most important to you, and that you can get access to solve the problems that you need to solve with the information that you need to solve it.
Hey Brett, this is Karin. Can I toss something out there as you're developing this policy, because there are so many end users outside of HR who will be impacted by that policy? Is there a way that you could take a couple volunteers from this regional group right here to help input on that one? I'm looking at some of the questions around the rationale for who gets what access. That would be super helpful to have, and making sure that that's in the policy. And what's the operating model around, and this is probably beyond access, but the roles and responsibilities. So is there a way for some folks who are pretty passionate around this to talk with you, or whoever's building the policy, to make sure that the pain points are addressed in a way that makes sense to the end user that's not HI?
Yeah, I'm certainly happy to have input and have discussions if you want to get some key folks who want to volunteer to have conversations with us. We can listen to their feedback and see how we can best incorporate it, and then ensure that we're addressing the whys. To your point.
Great.
And
Thank you.
and in terms of the EDW ending, that while we are articulating that we would say, and I know we all have to run to our next meeting, that it's end of life, but realistically, I think it will be here for a few more years. So I don't think that's not a concern for today or tomorrow, but it is something that we have to make sure we're all addressing going forward.
So we are at 3 o'clock, and I know multiple folks have probably other hard stops. Oh, and then Susan, did you hear? So it's probably going to be a few years on EDW. So and probably more clarity around that. Probably upcoming, right? As we get sort of these other things launched. Moving close to when you retire. Yes, exactly. So we are at time. One of my thoughts actually as we talk about, there's clearly a lot that we need to talk about and like to talk about. Thank you very much for this conversation. Brett, Hannah, and Brooke, what I would like, if it's okay by you, is maybe setting up another one of these maybe next month, because clearly there's a lot of discussion and a lot of questions, and give the folks another opportunity. We can go through the survey, figure out other things that we would like to talk about, and keep this conversation continuing.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for us to actually listen to you all talk to your how you're collaborating currently, because that will allow us to better understand the problems that you're trying to solve.
And by that, you mean collaborating currently within the different regions, or?
Exactly. I think understanding, because we just talked about access to data, but we didn't talk about what problems you're actually trying to solve. And I think that would be incredibly helpful to us, because that's the access. I mean, data in itself isn't useful. It's data in context with meaning in a way that can drive decision making and change, right? So understanding that piece would be incredibly helpful, because then we can ensure that we're addressing those issues.
Perfect. So folks on this call, what I'll probably do is send something out to everyone to give us some case studies of some of the problems that you're trying to solve, specifically where access for you made it more challenging or difficult to be able to get to where you needed to get to.
Yeah, that would be really helpful.
Okay, we'll pull that together, and then we'll kind of go through the same scenarios on a subsequent meeting. Okay. So folks, any other burning platforms right now? We'll get this group back together. Normally we've just met quarterly. I anticipate I'd actually like to do this probably within the next month or so. So we'll work with Brooke, Brett, and Hannah to see what works for their schedule, and we'll try to, as best we can, make it a time that works for everybody. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Thank you all. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Brooke, Brett, and Hannah, thank you. I know this has been incredibly valuable, and I think it's been nice for everybody to listen to it together. So thanks tons. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.